Do il benvenuto a Jack Markell, ambasciatore degli Stati Uniti d'America presso la Repubblica Italiana e la Repubblica di San Marino. Thank you very much. Here, yes. C'era il microfono? Ah, ce l'hai lì, perfetto. Allora, l'ambasciatore come diciamo, vi do due note biografiche. Jack Alan Markell è stato governatore dello stato del Delaware dal 2009 al 2017 e oggi è quindi una carriera, diciamo, che nasce, come giusto che sia, nella politica. It's a pleasure here. Thank you very much. Allora, la prima domanda che le vorrei fare, facciamo tutta in inglese e poi se c'è problema la proviamo a tradurre in italiano, ma insomma tanto sapete tutti come funziona. Volevo capire quale immagina possa essere, una domanda generale, il ruolo degli Stati Uniti nel futuro. What role do you imagine for the United States in the near future?
Well, it's first of all, thank you for having me, it's really, this is a terrific event. I'm not aware of something exactly the same in the U.S., and I congratulate Confindustria and the young entrepreneurs, and I also congratulate your president for what I think was a very important and strong speech. And of course, it's always good to see Minister Crosetto as well. Look, I think the United States will continue to be focused on what we've long been focused on, working with our allies. On issues that are bigger than any one country. Certainly continuing to work, for example, with Italy and other allies on helping Ukraine in its fight against Russia's brutal invasion. Working to bring peace to the Middle East in a way that allows Israel to defend itself, but also tries to bring as many humanitarian supplies as possible to all, to protect civilians as much as possible, and of course focused on a two-state solution as well. There are so many issues that are bigger than any one country, and this is where our alliance is so important. This is why Italy's presidency of the G7 is so important. Of course, President Biden will be here in a couple of weeks to focus on these issues with Prime Minister Meloni and so many others, and we look forward to being at that table and to working as effectively as we can with the other G7 countries.
Great. The second question, very important in my opinion, is are we at a greater risk today than during the Cold War? Cioè oggi stiamo vivendo un periodo più complicato, rischi maggiori rispetto al periodo della Guerra Fredda in cui c'erano due blocchi che si contrapponevano?
This is a very complicated time, and it is a very dangerous world. That's one of the reasons that I thought the President's speech earlier, where he focused on the importance of investing in defense, the Europeans investing in their collective defense and the individual countries increasing defense spending, was really, frankly, a very important message. The U.S. works with a number of very important Italian defense companies. I've been, for example, to Leonardo. I've met with Fincantieri, with Avio and others, and I think you've got a strong base. But the more that Italy, the more the other European countries can invest in their collective defense, I think it's really important. So it is a perilous time. We're seeing what Russia, their true colors, are all about. This invasion of Ukraine, brutal, unlawful. They keep going. How many people have they murdered? How many women have they raped? How many children have they stolen, kidnapped? And so this is why we believe that from everything that Minister Crosetto just said, from what the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister have focused on, the synergy, the agreement between the U.S. position, Italy's position, so many others in Europe as well, has been so important. We are all very aware that Russia will, if it wins in Ukraine, who knows how much further it will go. And this war is very much, of course, to Ukraine's detriment, but we also believe that it is to Russia's to Europe's detriment. This is also why we are very focused on the fact that China is facilitating Russia's war machine. have no doubt about this. The evidence is very clear. And in terms of the provision of what are called the dual-use goods, things that can be used for commercial goods but can also be used for military purposes. And so we do wonder how any of us can think that this is a time where it can be business as usual with China when they are facilitating a war that is to the detriment of Europe. And similarly, I thought the president's comments in his speech this morning, the way it was translated to me is Europe cannot be a Rust Belt. That has particular meaning and resonance to the United States because we have seen what it feels like to families when entire industries are hollowed out because of changes in global trade. And what we're seeing right now as it relates to China is the dumping of products at prices that have been totally subsidized and frankly unfair. And what that means to families in Europe, the US, and elsewhere is something that's important for all of us to understand and think about.
Now I want to ask you something about United States. We have Biden and Trump. I want to ask you, are these two candidates perhaps a little older? United States is a great democracy, and I want to know, it's not a problem of age, no? Of course, the age is great because we have no, but do you think it will be a problem? One is 81, the other is 76 or 7? Avete capito, no? La questione un po' soft l'abbiamo posta, no?
Well, it probably won't surprise you to know that I'm not going to get into many comments about the election, other than to say, I mean, this is how our system works, and what I'm very confident of is that no matter what happens in the election, the relationship between the U.S. and Italy will continue to be very strong. It's one we have very strong. We have an incredible history together, and I think we also have a very bright future. But I mean, as the president said, this is an incredible year for elections. You have the European election here in a couple weeks, the one in the U.S. At the end of the year, and so many others as well. So this is how democracy works. In Europe, in Europe it works. In the U.S. it works. Plenty of other places, as you said, there are elections, but not democracies.
Great. And I want to ask you something about China, no? China, in your opinion, danger more felt in the USA than in Europe? Why?
Well, first of all, I think this is something that exists for all of us. Number one, we have to recognize there are some issues that are so big that cooperation with China and other countries is very important. I mean, take as examples climate change. The U.S. and Europe could make enormous progress on reducing carbon emissions, but if China and many other countries don't similarly make progress, we won't solve the problem. So we have to cooperate. We have to cooperate on issues like the pandemic. What's the next pandemic? We saw in the previous pandemic, you certainly saw it in a big way in Italy, we saw it in the United States as well, how quickly a pandemic can spread. And one country cannot isolate itself. We can't protect ourselves. We have to find ways to work together. So there are some issues where we have to cooperate. It's to the betterment of everybody. There are places, I think the Minister Crosetto talked about the importance of the supply chain. And what we're doing with the U.S. with China, we're not decoupling our economies, but we are trying to de-risk and recognize that we have to find alternative places for supply chains, whether it's the critical minerals, as Minister Crosetto talked about, or whether it's suppliers. But I do go back to the point I made a moment ago. We do have a significant concern about what the dumping of Chinese products means for working-class families in the U.S., in Europe, and so many other places.
And I want to ask you, what is happening, in your opinion, in our universities, in Columbia University or in Italian university? Why the young people don't consider it sexy democracy, And I think in the West there is a very, very big problem inside the university. You think so? Or?
Well, first of all, I mean, I won't comment, I think, on what's happening in Italian universities, but I will say, as it relates to the American universities, I think for the most part, what we have seen is American students acting in the spirit of protest, which has been, part of our tradition from the very beginning. Having the ability to protest and make your point clear is very important. When that becomes violent, unacceptable. The anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia, a big problem in our country. And so many of us are obviously very concerned about these protests, particularly when they become violent. And we also respect the rights of students in a non-violent way to make their case. And we certainly understand in the case of, so many of the recent protests have been in the context of what's happening in Gaza. There are so many families in the Middle East who have been more than traumatized. The families in Israel who suffered so much on October 7th, and then innocent people in Gaza who have similarly suffered. And as I said at the very outset, we believe Israel absolutely must be able to defend itself, and we also believe that every step must be taken to protect civilians and ultimately get to peace between the parties.
How is Italy seen by the USA in this period, in this era?
So first of all, I mean, the relationship, and Secretary Blinken has said this, the relationship between the U.S. and Italy, we believe is as strong as it's ever been. I was at the White House in March when Prime Minister Maloney went to visit with President Biden. A very strong relationship, both on a personal level, but I also think substantively. The President very much respects what the Prime Minister is trying to achieve, for example, with the Mattei Plan. Her language has been very clear about first of all, people should have the right not to have to migrate because they should have strong conditions in their own countries, but also the importance of treating the African countries not as recipients of charity, but as equal partners. And so this is something that Prime Minister's been focused on and something also the President's been focused on.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question.
Yeah.
Do you prefer pizza or hot dog?
Pizza all the way.
Pizza?
Pizza all the way.
Not with pineapple?
No.
Okay, really pizza. Thank you very much. Thank you.